Well, hello and welcome to 2021, and we're back with the Money Talks, and we're back with another amazing founder and lots of conversations to happen. I think a founder in the B2B space, and so Omkar, welcome to the
Thanks.
show, and thank you for opening 2021 for us.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Really happy to be here. It would have been exciting if this was episode 21 in 2021. But we are just five
we,
episodes ahead. That's good.
we tried, and I think it was serendipity that 25th episode ended the year. So,
Right.
you can't have it all, I guess. But Omkar, you run a very successful and a very amazing business, especially in the fintech space, right? And who would have thought that in fintech there are people who can make money, right? Especially profits, and you've done that. So I think we'll have this conversation, understand your journey, and
Sure.
and which all started out at RA Podar College of Commerce and Economics. But before,
Right.
while all of that is okay, you are also a CA, from what I understand.
Yes.
So, what was your goal? Like, this. I think a lot of us just become CAs. Like, what did you intend to like audit books? What was the reason to become a CA?
So CA, it's a long story sort of. So my grandfather had taken me to the RBI's mint to see how notes are printed, how currency is printed. And that's where I started having conversation as in ये पैसा इधर से छप के जाता कहाँ है? How does the
Acha.
money circulate? Basically, then how do the banks rotate and how people trade, etc. The crux of that entire aspect was who is at the center of managing that money. The answer was a chartered accountant. So only then
Good
there is
one.
one profession that takes care of all the money that is rotating, be it business, investments, lending, whatever. There is a chartered accountant in the middle. Okay, I want to be there. Basically, I want to be at the center of managing those funds. Although basically that never really sort of took in that direction over a period while proving my articleship and all of that other aspects, I was slightly more inclined towards beating or being against checklist,
Okay.
right? So essentially, when you go for a traditional audit, internal audit, statutory audit, these are checklist driven. So I was always to ignore that and do my own stuff, which led me to sort of unearth a few frauds, started investigating, start sniffing around. And that's what led me to sort of get into the overall investigative phase as well, because there was when you do your chartered accountancy course, there is a statement that is made and that is taught to everyone. An auditor is supposed to be a watchdog, not a
Hmm.
bloodhound. I turned out to be a bloodhound. And that's basically where it sort of took a pivot into a completely different vertical. Right?
No, I mean it's so amazing that experience I think also defines why you got into the business that you're doing right now. So we're again in the middle of a lot of
Yeah. So there is no dearth of
but
frauds in India, so there will always be that demand.
but do you think that the CA prepares you to become an entrepreneur?
To an extent, CA does provide that because you start off by auditing individual vouchers. Vouching
Acha.
is one of the most boring part that people look forward to or look up to. That's the most mundane, boring thing you can do for an audit, right? But for me, it was an exciting part because I knew exactly then how does this business earn money and where all do they spend. It gives
I
you an
see.
in-depth insight in terms of how an exact business operates, what kind of expenses you need to look for. So when you're starting off your own, you need to understand what things you need to budget for, how you're going to spend, how you're going to scale, etc. And when you scale, what kind of expenses will crop up. That kind of
True.
experience comes in from those individual green tech vouchers, okay, travel and spending, basically you're printing and stationery and so on and so forth. I have seen cases where basically once you set up your own office, no one would imagine, but tissue papers at times take 25, 30,000 monthly spend.
Wow.
So those kind of things you don't really think about. You won't provide them as miscellaneous, but some of them might end up being inside. So
Whether you want to be an analyst or whether you want to be an entrepreneur, right? That control on numbers,
yeah,
as an investor or as a founder is so important. To understand, paisa kahan se hai, where is the money coming from, where is it going, and where is it generating, wealth for the company. So you got done with CA, and the first thing you did was you became an entrepreneur. No, I'm just kidding. The first thing you did was you joined a firm called EY, right?
yeah,
And that's, I mean, you joined as an associate consultant and worked your way through. But what was really interesting is you decided to join the fraud investigation team at EY,
Yeah,
and you were there for 3.5 years, right?
four
So
and a half. Yeah,
basically, yeah, 4.5 years. But no, you were in this role you were 3.5. In this
yeah,
role you were
4 years. Yeah, 4 years almost. Yeah,
4 years.
yeah,
This is I think a part of your EY team that you were working
yeah,
with.
yeah. So this was when I joined them.
Were you offered this choice? Why join the fraud investigation team at EY?
So that is said during my articleship days, I told you right. So as to go away from the checklist, I sort of identified a few frauds. Basically, I made the company repay close to around 10 crore rupees in my second year of articleship, and third year I found two more frauds in the same organization. So it sort
Wow.
of it excites you, right? So it's basically that's a different sort of an adrenaline rush when you catch a bad guy, you find that one anomaly, you catch hold of them, prove it, and basically ensure you take an action against it, right? So it was always exciting from that perspective. And when I got a call from EY, their first offer to me was to join the audit department.
Achha.
But so pretty clear, basically from my experience, I said only and only if you have an investigative division, I'm okay to join that, but otherwise I won't be. And they came back after 2 days. In fact, basically, when before I joined in, about a month or two back, they had formally set up the entire fraud investigation division itself. So I was technically about 30th or 40th employee there. That was part of the founding team. So major team had come in from KPMG and moved to EY, and
Achha.
that basically set up an interview. One round, one hour, I had a conversation, told them about my experience, got an offer letter at the end of the day, started it off. So
And like, so that people understand, how important was that working for MNC for 4 or 5 years, right? After
yeah,
you were still a fresher, right? I mean, you were just
yeah,
finished your articleship, and you don't really. It's more of an internship than a full-time job, right? So
right.
joining EY with their processes and with their, the way they operate, how
Absolutely.
important was that towards helping you in your entrepreneurial career?
So it's more towards basically developing your personality. It is
Hmm.
essentially when you are part of that culture, understanding, basically communicating with clients, being part of an MNC, you're also dealing with global client base. So as to deal with clients in the US, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Russia, South America, etc. You understand different nuances. So basically, even as basic as your personal etiquettes improve greatly in terms of how do you pitch, how do you make the different sets of decks, the importance of branding, importance of color schemes, and how you have to communicate your messages across. Understanding basic importance and nuances of policy decisions, right? How do you even design, say, an employee reimbursement policy? How do you look at leave policies and so on and so forth? When you're working for a small organization, you may not have extremely robust aspects of like these. So working on an MNC definitely helps greatly in terms of improving your overall personality, the kind of diverse backgrounds of people that you work with, diverse experiences, the kind of work that you do. At the same time, the overall delivery mechanism, quality checks, ensuring basically reviews, and basically finally communication with the client. Even aspects that definitely helped me there greatly was even commercialization. Right? How do you determine how much you should charge for certain thing? How do you understand the use
Hmm.
case properly? How do you bill for that? And so on and so forth. So those elements definitely play a key role. For me, sort of, I was slightly lucky being part of a small team. I got a lot more exposure in that. Not every person, basically at an associate consultant level, gets this kind of exposure, but at an AC or a
Wow.
consultant level, I was working closely with the partners. I was creating the strategy plans for the next year. We're working on basically new presentations, research tasks, creating budgeting around that, etc. So that experience definitely helped being part of a small team and getting that attention for sure. But as well as more and more client interface, because it was a limited team, everyone had to step up and stand in front for and represent the brand. So that was definitely a massive, great experience for me overall in terms of conducting yourself, presentations, and articulating things in a much better manner. You cannot be vague in terms of what you mention, especially the field where we were in. I'm accusing someone of a fraud. I'm basically putting some blame onto someone. I need to
Hmm.
be 200% sure and articulate it in the best possible manner so it should not fire back at me. So how do you communicate things in the most crisp, proper manner? as well as safeguarding yourself, right? So the entire other elements, which majority of the smaller businesses forget about, is limitations of liabilities, understanding the concepts of indemnity, and so on and so forth, which become extremely critical when you're starting off on your own. Those are
Got
the
it.
critical terms you're going to sign up upon. So you need to understand those preemptively. This sort of helps from those aspects as well.
I've also heard that when you join a company like that, it also instills a sense of discipline, right? I mean, you've gone into some really the soft and finer aspects. Like, would you recommend, let's say, if you had a brother, right, and he was graduating, would you want him to directly become an entrepreneur, or first go work for a ENY or something like that, and then become an entrepreneur?
So it's either or. Basically, there's no straight answer to that, right? It depends upon what uh, you are looking to work upon. What is it that you're building? So the reason for me basically working at EVA and then taking an entrepreneurial jump, it did require me time to understand that space completely, to really appreciate that field and ensure basically I would be really happy continuing to do this for the foreseeable future. If someone has that understanding beforehand, ki, hey, this is my area of interest. I love doing this. I can be really great at this, and I am really great at this. You can go off, right? So people don't. You will have definitely examples of people even dropping out of college and starting it, right? So there is no clear answer. I would say at the core, essentially, is the moment you have a good realization that you truly love what you're doing, and you truly believe that you are exceptional or really good at that, you can take that plunge, right? And you can monetize it. So that's the third part. You need, if you are sure that you can make money off it, why not?
Go for it. Yeah, makes sense. That's a good, and so what was that trigger? Like you said, ENY was the place that
Hmm.
prepared you for Karza, and I know people want to
Right.
know what Karza does. And trust me, guys, it's a
Sure.
very exciting business. We've been part of this for now 3 years, but we're going to build up to it, and we're going to tell you what Karza does. But when did you know that, now there's a business that I can create?
Sure. So essentially, honestly, I had a completely different thought process of business. I always wanted to do something of my own over a period of time.
Hmm.
That thought process was there, but I never really had a push because it was more of silo, single-minded thoughts that I had. This was after I met Gaurav, basically the co-founder. He's also the co-founder at Karza. We used to hang out once in a while. We know each other from our college days, hang out with each other, and basically he had joined one venture. So it was basically when so we used to meet once in a while, and he had also recently joined a startup. It was into digital media marketing space. So a few of his friends had started it off, and he had joined them. So he was sharing his experiences. So it was finally sort of I found or looked to a partner that I can start off with or who can join me in this journey. But
Hmm.
my whole thought process of initial idea of to start off was I wanted to set up a comic book store.
Okay. Wow.
I've
Comic
always
book
been
store. Okay.
yeah, I was always fascinated by comics, manga, and I could never find a place. So, for example, if you've seen Big Bang Theory, you can walk into a
Yeah.
shop, scroll through those individual issues, pick those up. I couldn't find any such shops across Mumbai, Bangalore, anywhere, right? I said, this is something that is missing if I can build a business of it. And Gaurav just looked at me, smacked me on my head, basically gali diya, and then basically or pivoted me to a different direction, right? So if you want, you need to move more towards tech side, right? So you need to build a
Hmm.
technology platform. You need to think of something that is more scalable and so on and so forth. And that's where during those ideations, basically we came up with this overall thought process, right? So the first idea that we had thought about was actually P2P lending. It was
Oh
not the
wow.
Karza that is today,
Hmm.
but it was a P2P platform. And more we researched into that, etc. Basically, we thought through the overall process. We knew that it is going to be digital only platform. So how do you identify, underwrite people, do a background check? And that's where my experience in EY helped, right? So how do I do a completely discrete or basically background checks, digital due diligence on these businesses or individuals that are applying? And that in the end pivoted to what Karza is today. But a fact is basically it was sort of the blessing in disguise when that happened when I met Gaurav. I still remember it was either 2nd or 3rd of January of 2015. I had just met him after New Year's, and that's where we got this conversation started. And in fact, the October 2014, I had applied for my transfer to Chicago.
Oh wow.
In mid of January, so almost for 1 or 2 weeks, we had the conversation. We charted out. I made up my mind. Hey, I'm going to start. Now I have someone to go along with me. The day I got a confirmation about my transfer to Chicago, it was approved, cleared by both Chicago office and Mumbai office. The day I got that approval, I put in my resignation. So it was one of the hardest days to take that call. You on one side, you
Wow.
have the entire American dream. You're going to go to Chicago. You can have a massive growth opportunity, learn a lot more things, and do global investigations than what you're doing right now. To starting off something of your own. So that one day was the most toughest day. My partner also just messaged me, "Okay, let me know what you want to do." I asked for that one day at night. I just messaged him. I'm putting in my papers.
About at that time, India was not even digital. Like
Yeah,
India is digital today. You're talking
right.
about a time, when India wasn't digital. So what was that trigger? What did you know? You know what? करना तो यही करना है.
So it was basically that's what basically I've always had that mindset in terms of looking at much longer term prospects, right? And then short term elements. And it was just a matter of doing a mental math that if I take this risk, maybe 10 years down the line, where will I be? And
Hmm.
what would be the position that I would be in, be it in terms of wealth, the overall maturity, or the stature, etc. Vis-a-vis where I would be in terms of EY, right? So max to max in 10 years, where would I be? I would have been a partner, maybe earning 2-3 crores per annum,
Yeah.
a happy life, but I'll be still serving someone, right? I'll be still answerable to a lot of people from that perspective, and I'll be doing the same stuff all over again and continue to do that. Or here I have an exciting opportunity, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, I can be 10x, 20x of what I could have been in EY. And that
Hmm.
opportunity is there. And that opportunity was then, right? So it was a very tough decision. But I had to take that plunge basically because it was now or never sort of, because the moment I go to US, for me to get out of that cycle and then think about it again is not going to happen. I had that
True.
confidence from that perspective. And it was also a major decision from a financial perspective because I don't come from a family of wealth as such.
Yeah,
When
I
I had
understand
to,
that you had like a very little money when you decided to
yeah,
make the leap of faith.
absolutely. So 31st March is basically where I quit EY, got my last pay. A major aspect that helped me then was the support of family. Right?
Hmm.
So family has to support you irrespective. I just remember the statement from mom: "तो जो करना है कर, give your best. Don't worry about how the house is going to run. I'll manage it for 2 years. I'm giving you 2 years, but make it happen." So that was
Wow.
just a statement from her. Rest everything is up to you. Then basically it's about you, your abilities, and basically your perseverance. That's all.
And this is around the time you also met Hardik, right?
Yes. So Hardik and me were in college as well. So me, Hardik, Gaurav, all three of us
Acha,
were
acha.
the same college, same batch.
Tell us, what does Karza do?
Sure.
I know what it does. I'm part of the entire story, but let's explain to everybody else what does Karza do. Vikas,
Right.
here's your answer.
So essentially, the overall concept also stemmed from my experience at EY, right? We used to undertake extensive diligence investigations into different businesses, individuals, unearthing how basically money has been siphoned off, transferred, stolen, shell entity behaviors, and so on and so forth. And during that time, we used to leverage on a lot of public information, right? So definitely, government has been at the forefront of digitization. There are multiple aspects, right, from RTI, transparency policy, as well as Digital India initiatives. They're being more and more transparent in terms of all of these aspects. But the challenge was no one really knew how to leverage on this intelligence and how do you create a decisioning and how do you bring it all together. Because again, all of this was scattered.
Yeah.
One department will say these are shell companies, other department will say these are defaulters, other bank these are sick industrial units, these are some of the fraud cases that have happened. So all of this information was scattered across the entire spectrum. So our whole thought process was, if I'm going to do it, if I'm doing it manually, I take about 30-40 days to go through all of this, compile, make an entire use case, understand how the modus operandi work. Why can't I digitize it?
Hmm.
Like, why can't I create a gateway through which all of this intelligence can be brought into one place? And also, it gives you a completely different perspective when you're starting to deal with other businesses, right? So that's where the whole thought process was: how do you leverage on the entire digital intelligence to create a mechanism or an algorithm that will help any institution tackle the aspect of counterparty risk. So
Hmm.
counterparty risk is everywhere. You're dealing with someone that you don't know, and you want to know everything
Omkar,
about
only
what
thing
has
I'll
been.
request you, I think you're
Yeah.
talking a lot of fintech speak that I will understand,
Yeah.
right?
So
But
okay.
counterparty risk, yeah. So
So it's
let's
basically
just
how do you trust the other
imagine you're
person, right?
explaining it to an investor that has no
Right.
idea what the heck you do, right? And
Sure.
so how do you do it?
So
Yeah,
so how do you, it's only about how do you trust the other person, right?
yeah.
Can I trust you to do business with you? Can I
Mm,
trust you to buy from you, to sell to you, invest in you, lend money to you, or any other transaction? Every transaction
correct.
requires a counterparty trust that people
Yep.
have to
True.
believe in each other. And for that, basically, as you move digital, the time that you have to take that decision, whether you trust or not, reduces drastically.
True.
Today, you are taking decisions. Basically, you have aspects like basically you have personal loans disbursed to your account in 5 minutes, business loans disbursed in 1 hour, right? So
Yep.
if you have to take decisions at that pace to understand whether the counterparty is genuine, the business exists, it basically it's dealing in the same goods or basically services that you are banking upon. Is the business
True.
making money or what they are claiming to be? In order to enable all of this, basically that's where Karza comes into play. So Karza has built one of the largest comprehensive digital due diligence platforms, which helps in delivering you intelligence as well as a risk parameters about any business. So today we profile close to 2.5 crore businesses across the country in a
Wow.
matter of milliseconds. Elements, for example, something like a Google has to issue a QR code to a merchant in one
Hmm.
minute. So how does that's where we come into play to enable Google Pay to give them a comfort. Hey, this merchant actually exists. This is the location. These are the products that they deal in. This is the vintage. This the account is also genuine, etc. In a matter of 15 seconds to 20 seconds for them to issue a QR code then and there. Similarly, your lending decisions are slightly more what do you say complex in terms of that. So all of these elements, how do you basically elevate or basically address those problems for banks and take them digital to help them scale as well, because any business that is dependent on manual processes will never scale to the best extent as a digital
Very true.
product. And the core, if I had to summarize it in the most layman terms, what we are working towards is that today you go to a bank's website, you apply for an account, you apply for a loan, you enter those details there, you enter your mobile number, email ID, etc. When you submit, you get a message, one of our customer service executives will get back to you.
Yep.
And that's where the entire manual machinery starts. What
True.
we are working towards is the moment you submit that form, you should have an offer, you should have an account opened, your job should be done then and there. That's the kind of digitization that Karza works, which automates the entire process of a bank, right from onboarding customers to underwriting them, defining their credibility and creditworthiness, ensuring basically a digital dispersal of facilities to even continuous monitoring. Because the moment a loan is disbursed, the job is not done. You have to ensure that basically the business is still consistent throughout the period of the tenure of the loan. So continuous monitoring, early warning signals, and last is collections. So even assistance in recoveries wherever customers have turned bad, right? So the entire value chain is what Karza digitizes to.
So this is a B2B. So it's a B2B SaaS kind of a platform. Or it's
Absolutely.
rather a PaaS platform, right? It's a platform as a service.
So it's both basically. So
Okay.
it's platform as a service, but we provide both APIs which plug in into the platforms of the bank itself, or we provide the entire platform ourselves as well.
And who are your usual customers? Like, who do you call? Would the person applying for the loan be the customer or the bank?
The institution. So as of now, the
The
bank or financial institution is basically the major customer base for us. But what we are working towards essentially it's a generic problem, right? So that's where use cases are expanding beyond banking. So we're working right
Hmm.
now with insurance companies, payment gateways, even B2B commerce, e-commerce platforms, B2B trading platforms, something like say Udan or a Solve, etc., which are B2B transaction monitoring. So any place where you're dealing with someone and you need to get that factor of trust in, you need to have a good verification and a comfort about that. More in terms of credibility is what we are looking for. We're not so much in terms of credit worthiness.
Okay.
We're dealing in terms of credibility. Can I trust this person? Is he genuine or is it a fraud? Right? Is that person going to cheat me in the near future? Right? So those kind of aspects is where we predominantly work towards. And that's where our algorithms are also trained. So we're working on right now a Karza score. It's basically going to simplify the overall credibility checks. And the first check that we're doing is to identify whether a particular business is genuine or is it a shell corporation. So
Okay.
over the years, we have studied close to 30 to 40,000 different businesses, understand how their patterns of financial, non-financial parameters differ, and basis that take a call and give a judgment that way. So example being, and this is something the thought process comes in when you're from an investigative side, right? People have seen company records again and again, right? So they have seen master data, they have a company registration, etc. They have their email IDs, addresses, and you verify that. What we just saw was basically, if okay, these guys have declared those details to MCA, can I just re-authenticate those? So we just took the
Hmm.
email ID that has been used to incorporate it, and we revalidated all of those. To our surprise, it was about close to 80 to 85,000 active companies have been incorporated using fake email IDs.
Wow.
There are companies incorporated using IDs like junk@junk.com, fake proof at gmail.com. That's the official
Fake
email
proof.
ID used to incorporate the company. So if the inception has started off with such a fake document, the ensuing details you can't really
Correct.
trust, right? So even these minor aspects you need to take care of and look at from a microscopic view to
I just
determine.
remember your pitch to me was very
Right.
simple. You said, "Sir, this company came to a bank, right?" And I told you,
Yeah.
"Don't call me sir." But anyways, you said these guys came to a bank. They asked for a loan. Bank said, "Can you prove to me whether this business is real or not?" And
Right.
and then you showed me one document, which was basically the clinching document for me, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Ki we connected this company through some 80 different shell corporations to
Right.
a fraud, not a fraud, but rather a bankrupt
Hawala.
company."
Yeah.
Yeah, Hawala business basically. And we to and that and until that point, the bank was, I think, gonna issue a loan of some 200 plus crores to them.
Yeah.
And because of this, they changed. And I thought, no brainer, like,
Right.
But I believe at that time the entire process was manual.
Right. So we started off with the manual concept. Or
Hmm.
we wanted to do more and more cases, understand, get more real life cases, right? So it was conceptually, it does sound beautiful, but when you start doing things practically, you start looking at actual applications flowing into banks. You understand the kind of cases coming in, you understand the importance of each information source or basically each data point and how that impacts your overall decision. So
Right.
definitely that initial 1 or 2 years executing these cases manually definitely helped us. One is improve on overall research, understanding of various sources, as well as implications of those, application of that, right? How does basically each data point impact the other? And so the cause and effect relationship, and then how do
In
you
that
build
sense, the
it?
entire fintech ecosystem,
Mm,
would be a customer for you, right?
absolutely.
And so if any
Absolutely.
company wants to set up their lending processes, they should be talking to Karza.
Right.
Because there's a question from Vikas which says that Karza specializes in business or personal loans.
So we don't really specialize already. So we cater to the entire spectrum. So we any process, be it a retail loan or basically business financing, we cover both these elements. We are constitution agnostic. It's basically whether it is an individual customer, sole prop, partnerships, trust, societies, companies, LLPs, listed corporations. There's no bar in terms of what type of entities that we look at assisting the banks with. So we cover the entire spectrum as well as different products, right? It's basically not only limited to lending as a use case, but we look at current account, savings account, onboarding. Basically, there are also risk assessment and compliances are different. We're looking at foreign exchange transactions and so on and so forth. So there are different elements within the banking spectrum that we cater to.
And tell us more about this Karza score.
All right. So Karza score essentially is where we are looking to simplify of how you consume the overall outcome of what we have built, right?
Hmm.
Essentially, I can share a 500-pager report on a corporation with you. There's a high probability that you're going to get lost. What do I do with all of this, right?
Hmm.
So that just score essentially is a method to simplify that overall credibility of a particular given entity and how do you rate them or rank them. So the first, basically, what do you say? The first leg of scoring that we're working towards is a shell entity score. It's just a pure black and white, right? So there are blacks, grays, and whites. So what we are first working towards is identifying the blacks. These are completely shell bogus corporations, right? These may be pure play for as a front for investment. These are into insider trading, market manipulations, hawala traders, or basically pure play money laundering businesses. How do you identify those traits and give an upfront basically flag or an alert? So that are dependent on multiple factors. And I can't share basically explain individually some of those. So basically it's easier to simplify them of a score. So that's basically Karza score. The aim basically Karza score has to be what we're looking towards is it becomes sort of the central assurance factor behind any business transaction. So that score
So
is
if
what
you're
we're
a
aiming
fintech
towards.
company and you want to also manage your portfolio, right? And you're saying, okay,
Right.
I had lent to maybe 10,000 individuals or 1,000 businesses, whatever that number may be, then Karza, you also integrate with Karza to sort of get a more portfolio kind of a look at what's happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So these are some of the things that do come in across. So for example, there are a couple of banks that are getting merged, or people are acquiring others' portfolio. ARC companies acquire banks' portfolios, so they want to have an overall understanding of the entire base. So you have an entire portfolio scrub quickly done to understand what you're getting into, right?
True.
What is it exactly that you're buying out, and what's the probability, how deep or bad they are, right? Because even from an ARC, they are still looking for defaulters from a financial standpoint. They don't want to deal with fraudsters,
Correct.
right? If it's a fraud company, then there is no point. It's not going to come in because the intent was not there in the world too. So even those screening sort of entire portfolio scrubs is something that we help with.
So do you also help maybe investors evaluate companies that are in the listed space? Would that be
Absolutely.
something?
So yeah, so it's not a listed or unlisted either of those. So
Okay.
basically, we work with a few of the PE funds, VC funds, in terms of who are either looking to invest in new ventures, as well as looking to acquire Indian businesses or take in a majority stake or strategic deals, etc. So they want to know a complete background about not only the entity but the entire group, or what are the other things that they have been involved in, etc. And what's the background of these businesses that they have started. So from that
Now, I'm going
perspective,
to
also we
ask you
help.
a question, and if you say yes on chance, I think you will have so much business today that you might have
Hmm.
rethink your fundraising plan. Can you reduce the due diligence time taken for a startup through
Hmm.
your system down to 1 day?
Absolutely. So what we can at least do is basically within 1 hour or 15 minutes rather, what we can help the diligence agencies just to shortlist the areas where they can focus their diligence upon. Right. So
Okay.
you'll be covering so many elements: financial DD, basically you have statutory compliances, you have negative screening, employee DD, etc. So there are certain elements where you need to definitely deep dive. Basically where you need to deep dive in terms of legal due diligence, where you actually need to go through contracts, etc. So there's a question from Rohan which says how Karza score will be different from bureau scores, right? So here basically bureau is predominantly dependent upon their existing or historical loan performance, right? What we're looking towards is alternate information and more focusing towards the credibility of that entity rather than the credit worthiness or the repayment track, right? So this, we are agnostic whether basically a person has a credit history or not, or whether business has prior credit history or not. So we are agnostic of that, and this is more of external credibility check rather than a credit score sort of an aspect. So we are more or less complementary to a credit bureau score. We closely work with all the four bureaus. We go to market together as well in some of our offerings. So we are complementing to each other rather than competing with each other.
Coming back to the point of fundraising, right? You raised your first round. I mean, friends and family. I knew there was a small round over there, but then you raised your first round where you had
Right.
Siddharth, Anand over there. You had Dreamweavers, you had
Right.
Rajan, right?
Right.
When did you know that you were going to be big, right? Before like was it when you raised the money or before that or after?
Honestly, honestly, I still don't know whether how big I'll be. Right? So I'm taking 1 day at a time. Every new fundraise, see. Technically, or to be brutally honest, the day I look forward to is basically I don't need external funding.
No,
For
what
me,
I
the
let
miles.
me rephrase my question. I didn't mean big in terms of as a business big. Like you knew that you were solving a real problem and there was huge scale available.
Understood. So that definitely came in once the platform was live and we started going out in the market and we seeing that adoption, right? So we started off first month, the first client that we converted, and during that period we processed 15,000 transactions in that first month. Or we started off even before that, 2,000 transactions in a month. But just by the end of the year, we were processing already about 2 to 3 million transactions, right?
Wow.
So that pace of adoption that we saw during that 1 year, immediately next year we were 10 million transactions per month. The next year, to as of now, we're processing 20 million transactions per month. So the
Per month.
pace that I'm still looking at, basically it growing, that first year is the phenomenal jump that we saw in terms of the sheer volume of transactions and how this is going to revamp. That is basically definitely sort of sealed it for us. We need to, we're doing something right. It's solving a problem because,
Dude, this is even bigger than we thought.
huh?
We ever look at what I'm going, you know what? Dude, this is bigger than we thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. We still have that basically thought was right. So for basically total KYC, which was a product which was for digital KYC verification as a product. Initially, we had thought of it as a low-hanging fruit, right? So it's just a step foot in the door. We'll start off with some small business with the bank, at least get empaneled, and basically then focus on the Karza, scan, K-score, K-watch as the key marquee products. But what it turned out, basically, total KYC itself picked up in such a huge fashion. We never really imagined that the way it would, the kind of transactions that we would be processing or the client kind of adoption that we will see. It was supposed to be a side project, a means to start earning side revenue to keep us sustaining to build the major products. But that in turn has turned out to be one of the major products today as well for us. So definitely, yes, it sort of was that when we saw it push, this is something we're doing really good. Sort of we are on the right track. Sort of that one first year's transactions.
So let's talk about the fundraising, right?
Right.
You raised the first round. I think you guys were still building the product at that time. It wasn't really tech. It was obviously Alan
Right.
had enjoyed. So what was like? What did you tell investors, right? That got them convinced? You put together a pretty decent sized round, about 2.5 crores. What you guys raised in your first round,
Right.
right?
3.5 crores, 3 crores, all of that we raised.
And you had some like really good marquee investors coming on board, right? Rajan Anandan
Right.
from Google, now Sequoia Search, Singapore Angel Network. You know, you had Satvir over there. You had Artha came in, Greenviewer Investments. You had Anand Latsaria, Nitin Agarwal, so on and so forth. So, and these are not your, to put this kind of an investor pool into one company that
Right.
was so, and they're all good at fintech, right? They understand
Right.
fintech. What were you telling them that you got them on board without a tech? Tech
Yeah.
platform.
Right. So essentially, as is rightly said, even for you when we are president, it was more in terms of the potential and the value that we are delivering through this product, right? The conversation was more in terms of, and everyone came from a finance background. Everyone had basically an understanding of the banking system, and they themselves have been investors or bankers earlier. They understand these pain points in terms of how people cheat or how basically money is lost or when shell corporations, etc. And it was only about proving that we could think differently. So some of the things basically that initial set of investors also liked, especially if I had to think about Rajan or anyone else. Rajan, literally, we had one meeting, and the second meeting he was ready to draw the check. And even we were surprised. ऐसा आपने क्या देख लिया हम में? And Gaurav literally asked him that question, why, how did you take this decision so fast, right? So there are a couple of things, each one of them has different ones. So for you, Nitin ji, and a few others, it was the core thought was the product itself for what we were trying to build and understanding of that use case. Hey, there is a genuine need for this. There is nothing in the market that provides such an intelligence or a platform. So there is definitely a need. On the other side, there were more of qualitative decisions. So, for example, when Rajan basically why we choose. So he mainly made an emphasis on our journey that we started off with a P2P platform, did basically 3 to 4 months of research, understood that's not going to work, pivoted, created another product, started on that, basically then tweaked it. So for example, although we started off with this whole idea of score, we broke it down to a watch. Then from watch came in K-scan. From K-scan, we broke it down to a KYC, which was a microservice. So that's what he said. This is something that what like me. Founders should know when they are failing and they should take a call, pivot. They should know exactly when to pivot. You cannot hang on to that same idea and try to drag yourself through it, despite you knowing basically that it might fail or is going to fail, right? Or you cannot do that sort of. So his say report was basically that thought process that you have, because then I can trust you as a founder. And I know that you guys will take a call. You're self-conscious from that perspective. That tomorrow, even if this fails, I know you're going to do something else and you will keep the business rolling. You'll work, you'll understand how to pivot and when to pivot. and move to the next idea, right? So you don't hang on to the failures. So there were different sort of experiences we had. Subconsciously, we did not even think, okay, this could be a factor, sort of, but these experiences definitely sort of converted during those times.
And where do you see Karza now? 5 years now. Now you're crystal gazing, right? You completed
Right.
almost 5 years as Karza. Where do you
Right.
see yourself? We're doing this episode Jan 1st, 2026. Right?
So yeah. So that time definitely I'm looking forward to survive the more, what do you say, at a much larger scale than we are. So uh, at 5 years hence, I'm not only looking at basically in India. Maybe I should be able to take this call from somewhere abroad, purely from perspective that you cannot stay in one Chicago as well. Maybe I'll be setting up my business there or an office rather than being employed there. So definitely global expansion is one of the key elements that we are looking from this. So it's not only India where these problem statements are, working towards how these similar products can help alleviate problems for organizations in Southeast Asia. We're exploring South America and so on and so forth. So definitely where we want to move towards essentially is being a digital due diligence platform for India to move into a global digital due diligence platform where we should be serving the entire BFSI fraternity across the globe and not just in one geography. So that's basically the aim that we are working towards.
You said you could reduce the due diligence time for a startup to a day or even less by directing where the due diligence should be. So if somebody
Right.
wants to reach out to you, and there's going to be a bunch of founders who will, right? Because you've just basically taken the biggest pain point they had and said, I can reduce it to almost nothing. How can they
Right.
reach out?
Okay, so I'm always available on LinkedIn. That's definitely there. You can email me. In fact, one of the things that we have ensured since the beginning, both me and Gaurav, if you go to Karza.in website, the contact numbers that are there are of me and Gaurav. That's something that we have always ensured as an experience to our customers, despite of how big we grow. Having a conversation first with the founding team, we're always available from that perspective, right? So any person, any inquiry that also comes in first comes to me and Gaurav. So we've always been sort of always approachable, always there. So the contact numbers on our website are mine and Gaurav's. You can reach out to either of us. Our email IDs are also available, Omkar and Gaurav @karza.in. Pretty easy to remember that way. So happy to
Very unique
interact with
thing.
people.
Put your phone number out there right on the website. I mean, think about it. I'm thinking about maybe it's time for me to put my phone number on the website.
Yeah, but be prepared. Basically, Gaurav spends on a daily basis, on an average, 7 hours of talk time daily, 7 to 8 hours of talk time on an average daily. So you need to be geared up for managing that kind of a call influx. So
Wait, that is quite a bit. But no, I guess that's also his primary role. So it means a
right,
lot of.
right,
So
right.
that being said, I think what we'll do is that we'll move into the rapid fire. I think you've seen a
Sure.
few of these before. So basically, I'm going to ask you a question. The first thing that comes to mind, you answer it. At the end, if we have any questions that there are remaining, we'll take them over. But I know we've already crossed our time by quite a bit. So
Sure.
let's start. Are you ready? The first thing
Yeah.
that comes to mind, you cannot think. So the first question is a Peter Thiel question, which is one thing that you know to be true, but very few people agree with you on it.
It's slightly a complicated question. Huh? Basically, one thing that I know to be true, but
You are 100% sure about, but almost everybody you know does not believe that to be true.
honestly don't have anything on top of mind of that sort.
Like,
Uh,
be a unicorn? I don't know. What's the one thing?
Not sure. Really. Basically, I usually a lot of people end up agreeing with me. So,
Okay, that's a fair enough answer. Maybe that's what it is. It used to be that
yeah,
everybody agrees with you, but most
yeah.
people don't agree.
So yeah, that could be one. Yeah, definitely.
One piece of advice to founders about fundraising.
Uh, Again, basically, be brutally honest, be completely transparent, have a clear vision in terms of this, to whatever you're building. Be confident, basically, while you're presenting, and be confident of yourself. So, if you yourself or confidence is easy to convince any other person from that perspective. And lastly, don't get demotivated if someone says no. Right. So I look at it from the other way around. There are too many fish in the pond.
Yeah.
It's law of large numbers. More the number of people you touch base with, the higher the probability of conversion.
And like I mean, I definitely can say it from your side. I mean, we've also seen rounds that have been put together and that did not land up being where they were. But
Yeah.
for a fact that how good you guys were simply because your follow-on round was not something we planned. Because actually, I was meeting people for my own fund, and they're like, "Listen, we
Right.
noticed this in your portfolio, and we want to invest in it because my NBFC or my somebody I know says that
Yeah.
that we should be part of this company." I was like, "Wow, Karza is going to be big." Like when other companies, Karza is going to be really big. So,
Yeah.
who's your favorite superhero and why?
Superhero is I have two. Basically, I'm not sure how many people know what it's Naruto, or it could be a Batman.
Bat-
So
Batman.
Batman in general, or Batman or Iron Man. It's slightly tied between those because those are still realistic. See, I can look forward to someone being a Batman or an Iron Man soon, sometime later.
I believe I'll know the answer to this question, but scaling before profitability or profitability before scaling?
Focus has to be on profitability. So that has been our primary motive since the beginning. We are here to earn money and not burn money. So if you have
And
that
how
mindset, basically, definitely.
growing the company? Like, have you been able to, like, how have you been able to manage profitability and scale at the same time?
Right. So essentially, see these two are not, I would say, different than each other. You need to understand only your scaling. Profitability is not an organization level profitability. You need to know basically your unitary profitability. If you're making money per transaction, if you're making good margins, scale is definitely going to pivot the overall organization to overall profitability. So both go hand in hand. So you need to ensure basically, so till date, we do not cut corners or we go below cost anywhere. So I need to be making, even if it is 1%, there has to be margin because that is something that is going to accumulate. Because the moment you start making losses per transaction, scale erodes that capital rather than adding any value. So scale is then detrimental to you. So unitary profit, but scale definitely is going to turn you overall profit.
Said by a true CA, right? If you're making gross losses, there's no way you can make net profits, right? So you
Yeah,
have to make profits to make net profits, and it's
yeah,
true. I mean, to me, I've always felt that you need to at least understand that you can have unit profitability, so that you know that when you're scaling, you're not increasing the size of the problem. When you're making
right,
gross, your net unit economics are negative. The more you scale, this problem only gets bigger, right? And
absolutely,
that's where the revenues grow and then the losses grow even bigger than that. So
absolutely.
true. If you could pick the brain of one person for 24 hours, ask them anything you want, who would it be?
Hmm. One person, definitely Peter Thiel.
Peter
I'll
Thiel.
uh, I'll pick his brain about the entire aspect of Palantir, right from his PayPal days to Palantir, specifically Palantir. That's one thing, that one organization that I also have looked up to after starting Karza. Basically, while I was starting Karza, Palantir was one organization that I always looked up to in terms. It was also similar in terms of the kind of work that we were doing in terms of the analytics. So Peter Thiel for sure would be one person that I'll pick my brains.
Peter Thiel, if you're listening in, right? We asked the first. Maybe we
Yeah,
can ask.
you have
Oh,
my my contact number.
Wendy, so you already said it. That's what guys done at nine. One thing you would like to change about the Indian startup ecosystem?
Uh, it's definitely progressed a lot, but I would say in general the perception.
In the due diligence timeline, so you can't talk about that.
No. So it's essentially the overall perception about the mindset of people in terms of startups, right? Uh, it's sort of either there would be an extreme side who would be looking at taboo. नहीं startups है बहुत risky करना ही नहीं है या इसके reliable नहीं है etc. इसीलिए जिंदगी खराब हो जाएगी and so on and so forth. So those extreme scenarios that are there. And second is basically the other extreme, which is complete misuse of the word startup. right? So essentially for anything you do, it's a startup sort of try to promote it and so on and so forth. So this is something that you need to sort of balance out. It's startups are not an extremely so that perception about starting off your own, perception of basically getting into a new venture, and perception of basically that both in terms of be it in terms of family side or in general communities, etc., but also from a client's perspective, right? So the organization, so for, especially when we are doing B2B, that played an extremely key role in making our life tough during that time, right? Hey, I'm a newbie, how can I trust you? Right. So
Correct.
although we were trying to sell trust, people didn't trust us. Right. So that amount of opportunities that are available for startups to prove their mettle with organization, that definitely can scale up a lot more, can be improved a lot more. Although there are different financial institutions, at least in fintech, you do see that happening. You have a lot more fintech acceleration programs. You have digital innovation and basically fintech initiatives that various banks or financial institutions are putting in place. That definitely gives you that visibility to some extent, but there is a lot more work in terms of the opportunity and the overall perceptions about a startup, right? Just because it's a new company doesn't mean that they are incapable or
True.
basically they will not be able to deliver sort of. So that's something, availability of opportunities and the overall perception about ventures is definitely, that is something that can be good.
Let's see. I've got two questions left. Uh,
Hmm.
three, three books that you would recommend to founders.
3 books.
Yeah. Or three blogs.
First of all, yeah, books definitely the most, a few of them that have definitely helped me is Godfather.
Godfather.
That is Godfather, Mario Puzo. So that overall, that taught me one thing is basically how do you be brutally honest and basically take the best or instant decisions, right? If there is something that is, so for example, it's all about if someone hurts my family or if someone comes to me, I don't care whether it's the other member is also part of family. You need to take corrective action, right? So how do you keep personal and emotions and basically business aside and take those calls on your foot sort of? That is one definitive thing. Godfather is one book that I go back again and again towards. Second, essentially, would be something like 0 to 1. That's one other one basically that I had read about, and that also constantly motivates, right? So it also helped me whenever I'm building new product. It pushes me to think of something new and not trying to replicate what somebody else is doing, right? It's not just about being me too. The moment you create something new is where you create a differentiator. That's second. And third and last essentially is where I read a lot of manga, graphic novels, any of those you pick up. It sort of just helps you broaden your imaginative horizons, right? You start thinking and you start understanding what is the scale or basically the length of imagination of any human being can extend, right? So there are concepts that you can see from comics that you can't even you don't ever have thought of. Seen comics basically that are of ages so far ahead, where basically you have aliens have invaded the earth, humans and aliens are now cohabitating, and the life then. How would the political scenario be then? How would news be disseminated? How do you consume goods, etc.? So you can, that is say example of that. So there are, it sort of helps you stretch your imagination, right? So you're not bound by your traditional thought processes and so on and so forth. What if basically it just broadens your overall horizon of how far and wide you can think and imagine stuff.
And I mean, I really think that even the comic part that you talked about, while what someone say, how does that help in business? But it's not really about helping in business. It really opens up your creative. It really gets your creative juices.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're still gazing like that. He's imagining
Right.
something like that. Something big for your own business. So it's definitely recommended. I mean, I like. Uh, I mean, I don't like reading comics as much as I like watching sci-fi movies, right? And it's all
Right.
it all. I'm a big Star Wars fan. And that's a
Hmm.
community you haven't even seen, right? And completely
Right.
agree. So many alignments there. I think I'll ask you one last question. According to you, what is one thing investors should bring to the table other than money?
Investors should bring to the table other than money, definitely network.
Network.
Network is network. Basically, even today, we also look up. And that is something that has greatly helped us. Is when you're starting off fresh, basically, the more the people that you're connected with, the better basically you'll have in terms of visibility, access, or even getting that first meeting or getting that first entry, right? Being from an investor perspective, the more seasoned they are, the more well placed or basically well rooted they are into the industry. That's definitely one thing that I look forward to, right? So basically, after the investor comes on board, I would expect much in terms of them giving excessive attention into the core operations and so on and so forth, because you won't also really have time. That's something that you're trusting us with, right? But from our side, basically, with our limited reach, what investors also add way better on top of that is their network. So what investors, the doors that investors can open up.
So founders hesitate in asking their investors to increase their network, and so like maybe you could, and this could be something we leave the conversation with. How can, like, how did you get your investors to open their Rolodex? And you've done that. You've done that.
Yeah.
How did you get them to do it?
So essentially, see, how do you get them to do it is slightly easier because their money is also on the line. They're invested in it basically, but on the other side, the amount of growth that you're going to get, or basically the scale that you're going to achieve, is definitely depend upon how well you're able to reach the market and basically get penetrated much better and open doors for you, right? So definitely. So the one thing is essentially they have invested in you because they truly believe in your product, right? And they believe in your vision. And when you as an investor are convinced with me and you've already put your money on the line here with me, so when you are passing or basically introducing me to someone else and you introduce this is an investee company, the counterparty already has built or has gained that amount of trust in me, because if I know this is my acquaintance, I know this guy, if these guys trust him, basically then they deserve my attention, sort of, right? So it's just sharing of goodwill, sharing of that, basically opening up those networks definitely is a key element that I'll always look forward to in any investor. So.
Getting an investor to refer you, whichever business you're trying to get referred to get that referral, right? You always start with 5 rounds, right? Because
right.
Like, this guy put money into this guy. Obviously, they know each other, and if I even know the investor, even from 2 degrees of separation, I'll still trust whatever they're recommending more than
right. And one thing is basically where, as you said, founders might hesitate. It might be purely from the perspective that I'm ashamed to ask because मैं कर नहीं कर पाया, मैं मदद मांगने जा रहा हूँ. But bro, so the whole thought was you're in a business. You need to scale. You need to grow up. आपको बेशरम होना पड़ेगा, right? So there's no right or wrong, right? This is for your business. It's for the growth of it, right? If you have someone who can connect you with an ex person that you need to be connected, always look forward to it. Always utilize that. There's no shame in basically connecting with people and looking for references and growing, especially your investor group. They are in this with you together.
I don't think I could have ended the episode on a better note. बेशरम होना पड़ेगा, right? Check your ego at the door, right?
Right.
If you're business, trust me, the ego needs to be at the door, because any ego you bring inside the door is only going to hamper your growth. So
right.
With that,
absolutely,
I really enjoyed the episode. I think we worked through challenges, much like how Karza's challenges were for the first journey. But I mean, I know for a fact, because I'm part of the journey, that this is going to be a fantastic something to watch out for. You've been a silent warrior so far, but I think things are really big in the next
Thank
few
you.
weeks. Thank you so much for being here. Any final thoughts before you sign off?
No. It's been a spectacular time that I spent with you. Nice, extremely good conversation. Nice to catch up with you as well for quite some time. Keep persisting. Be true to yourself. You will definitely grow. So,
and be patient.
Right.
All right, guys. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much, Gaurav.
Thanks a lot for everyone. Thanks a lot for all of you.